So I've seen a couple videos on YouTube now that are kind of in this style of like doing a breakdown of a series or whatever. Obviously, I have Mike's mic to thank for the Pretty Little Liars videos as like a precedent to this one. And then Mike's mic was inspired by Jenny Nicholson's like Vampire Diaries video. I think I also have like a little credit to Ryan David Gilbert's Unraveled series at Polygon for just like the paper on walls kind of breakdown sort of video. I mean, obviously I'm sure there's other people who have done that. So like I haven't come up with this style of video. That's just what I'm trying to say. But as you can tell, this is going to be a video about Nora Sakavic's All for the Game series trilogy. This video is going to cover book 1, and then hopefully I'm going to do other videos for book 2 and book 3. I think it's a great series to do this for because it's fairly complicated. It's like a sports trilogy, queer romance, crime, mafia, etc., etc. So there's a lot to like unpack with like everything that goes on. So I hope you'll enjoy this video. Before we get started, I just want to like I'll just put up on the screen like All for the Game certainly has like a lot of trigger warnings. So I'm just gonna put those up on the screen now, and yeah, if that like any of that stuff bothers you, I would click away. These trigger warnings, not all of them are going to be in this video, but like in the series overall. So yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, so I guess a little like more about the All for the Game series. They're by Nora Sakavic. They came out between 2013 and 2014. They're very popular on the internet. They're very big on Tumblr, which obviously I'm on. But yeah, I think this will be a great video. Also, I love these books, but like, so if anything I say is like critical, like just know that I do love them, but I'm like, also, yeah. So enjoy. Also, I get a lot of things. I have like a lot of misspellings. Don't call me out for that in the comments. All right, so we meet Neil Jostin. He's in Millport, Arizona. He's been squatting in houses because he doesn't have any parents, and basically living in the locker room of his high school XC team. His coach kind of lets him chill there. So Neil is chilling after a game when Coach Hernandez comes in and is like, I've got a surprise for you. I mean, he doesn't say that, but this man walks onto the scene, Coach Wymack. He is wearing a wife beater that shows off his tribal tattoos, according to Dora, which is like not the most professional look, but also, you know, sets David Wymack apart from the rest of the XC establishment as, you know, he's different. He has a different kind of team. So props. Neil kind of flips out when he realizes who Coach Wymack is, because Wymack is the coach of the Foxes. And on the Foxes is this bad boy, Kevin Day. Neil is very afraid of Kevin Day. Kevin Day had been on the Ravens, a team coached by Tetsuji Moriyama, who is his kind of adoptive parent, because Tetsuji created the XC sport along with Kevin's mom, and then Kevin's mom died in a car accident, and I think it's a car accident. Kevin's mom dies anyway, and Tetsuji adopts Kevin, and so Kevin is on the Ravens team along with Tetsuji's like nephew, Rico. So that's the deal here, is that Kevin was on that team until he had a skiing accident and broke his hand, his dominant playing hand, and moved to the Foxes. Now, the Foxes is like a ragtag bunch of, you know, troubled teens who Wymack has recruited, and they're always like dead last. They're terrible. So anyway, everyone freaked out when Kevin joined the Foxes because he had been like on the best team, you know, playing professionally, and now he's over here, and it's like, what? And Neil's freaking out though for a different reason, because he doesn't want Kevin to recognize him from his youth, because Neil is on the run from his father. So he thinks that Kevin could possibly recognize him because they knew each other or they met briefly when they were kids. So Neil's like, not cool, I don't want to be on this team, I don't want to be a part of this, and he tries to like take off. Okay, and at that point is when Neil is trying to get away. He runs into this kid, Andrew Mignard, who punches him with, well, he hits him with an XE racket, his goalie racket, causing Neil to bend over in pain, and he has to like catch his breath, and Wymack is like angry, but Andrew's just like, whatever, which is kind of just Andrew's deal. He's like casual violence all the time, so we love that for him. Neil has to like sit down and then have this conversation with Wymack and Kevin, but luckily Kevin doesn't recognize Neil, and Neil's like says he thinks it's because he's like wearing colored contacts and he dyes his hair. So Neil dyes his hair black and like wears brown contacts to cover his blue eyes. So fun. But Kevin, anyway, at any rate, Kevin doesn't recognize Neil. Wymack basically implies like that he thinks Neil's being like abused by his parents, or is like, yeah, basically he implies that he thinks Neil's being abused by his parents, or that his parents don't care about him, which is why he's fit to join the Fox's troubled kids team. So Neil's not gonna like correct any of these assumptions. He's just gonna kind of go with it. But in his head, he's thinking like, maybe I can play XE. Like, I love this sport. I, am intrigued by Kevin Day. I don't really have a plan for what to do next because my mom is dead. And so I might as well go join the team. So that's what happens. He says he's going to think about the offer. Like, he's going to take the papers home to get his parents to sign them, but, or at least to look at them. But he's already sort of decided that he's going to join the team. This is Neil run count number 1 because they offer to drive him home, and Neil just takes off running, which is a very Neil thing to do, you'll find. Okay, so anyway, Coach Wymack tells Neil that after he graduates, the next day, he can get on a flight to South Carolina, and they'll pick him up, and he'll start living on campus with them and like practicing with the Foxes. So yay, Neil is on the Foxes. Let's go. All right, just a brief aside about Neil's mom. So she is actually dead. She's died in California, on the run like from his dad in Seattle. He'll talk about it more later. But basically, she's dead, and that's why he's been like living on his own. That's why he's been squatting, and that's why he feels like he can join this team, because he's finally free to like make his own decision. Because like his mom has been very controlling and like hadn't let him rejoin an XE team for like fear of his father. So Neil definitely feels guilty towards his mom's memory for joining the Foxes. So that's important. Neil's arrival in South Carolina, take 2. Let's go. Let's get it. Neil arrives in South Carolina. He only has a duffel bag with him. Neil believes he's being picked up by Aaron. Aaron takes him to a fancy sports car. They get in the car, they drive. They arrive back in Palmetto, which is based off of, it's Palmetto University, State University, but it's based off of Clemson. It's where Clemson is. So that's that. Anyway, they get back to Palmetto, and they go to Wymack's apartment. Wymack isn't there yet, but he's entrusted Kevin, Andrew, Aaron, and Nikki to drop Neil off. So Neil already knows Kevin and Andrew, and he's just met Aaron, he thinks. And he meets Nikki for the first time. Nikki is Andrew and Aaron's cousin. Nikki can only be described as very gay and talks too much. He's always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and he's always saying it in a really, like, sexually suggestive way. So that's Nikki. That's all you need to know. And then they go up to the apartment. Neil kind of freaks for a moment because he doesn't want to live with an adult man because he's traumatized from his past with his father. Nikki notices Neil's response and says something to one of the twins in German. Now, Neil's not about to let on that he understands German, which he knows because he lived abroad in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland while on the run from his father, though why he would return to the United States, where supposedly his father is based, from Europe, I do not know. Anyway, Neil knows German. So they have this conversation about him. From this conversation, Neil is able to discern that it's not Aaron you're victim of, but Andrew. Now, this freaks Neil out because Andrew is supposed to be on medication. Andrew is supposed to be on medication because he attacked 4 men and nearly killed them who attacked Nikki outside of the bar. Supposedly, I mean, probably because, like, it was a homophobic attack. Anyway, Andrew attacked the attackers. So, good for him, honestly. But, anyway, as part of Andrew's, like, criminal deal, is that he will be on medication and go to therapy until the next spring. So, until the end of the next spring semester. So, Andrew should be medicated, which means he shouldn't be driving. So that freaks Neil out. At the same time, Kevin and Aaron are stealing whiskey from Wymack. So that's chill. Neil's not a fan. Anyway, Wymack shows up, gives Neil some keys, asks Neil how the drive was with Nikki, and Neil covers for them. He's like, yeah, I guess it was Nikki. Then these fools are like, let's go to court, let's practice. Neil doesn't want to doesn't want to leave his duffel bag, but Wymack gives him a drawer in his office, gives Neil the key, says, like, you can put your stuff here. So Neil dumps his bag there, locks it, takes the key with him. Anyway, they go to the court. Now, when they get to the stadium, Nikki says something to Neil about Neil being cute. Says, like, oh, Neil must have a girlfriend. Neil's like, no, I don't. And Nikki's like, unless you swing my way, of course. And he's like, let us know if you do, like, save me some trouble. And Neil's like, I don't swing either way. Let's go play. He's like, we're here for sports. I don't care about romance. And I'm like, oh, how times will change. But anyway, Neil's like, I don't swing either way. And they go on into the stadium. Now, the stadium is as orange can be. Everything is orange. It's like orange, all over the place here. Neil loves it. Neil's like in awe. And at this moment, I'd like to briefly explain Exy. So Exy is a bastard sport, according to Nora, that is a cross between like lacrosse, hockey, and soccer. So it's a lacrosse-style game played on a soccer-sized court. So it's got like the floor type of like a basketball. It's field, like basketball court. It's inside. There's like glass walls that surround it, so you can rebound the ball off the walls. And then there's it's got the violence of ice hockey. And there's like an inner court, which is the actual playing court. And then there's like an outer court, like an outer ring around the court where like the subs are, and the subs and the refs are. So anyway, that's sexy. Neil's like amazed because at Millport, they just had like a kind of court covering for the soccer field. And so it hadn't been like a real Exy court. This is like a big, real deal Exy court. And Neil's like, oh my God, when the fans come in here, oh my God, it's gonna be crazy. I love Exy. So anyway, they start practicing. Kevin is coaching Neil, Aaron, and Nikki. Andrew takes his medicine, so he's out, so he's not playing. So Kevin's, berating Neil the whole time. Neil's like, oh, I'm not good enough for this. And so when the practice ends, Kevin and Neil have this conversation, and Neil's like, I'm not good enough. And Kevin's like, give me your game. And it's just like chills. And Andrew at this point wakes up, and he's high from his medicine. And he's like, kind of whatever about it. And then Kevin's like, since we're going out back to Abby's house for dinner, like, you need to get a shower. And Neil's like, no way, I'm not showering with you fools. And Andrew's like, Kevin like is like, get over it. And Andrew's like, I bet he has scars. And then he's like, I read your file. Like, Coach Hernandez says you were being abused by your parents, blah, 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 blah. And Neil's like, you had no right to do that. And Andrew's like, chill, I was lying. I just inferred it from context clues. And it's like, yeah, Neil, your behavior, coupled with the rest of the situation, this was inferable. So anyway, Andrew's like, chill. Coach Wymack installed individual shower stalls because, like, out of pocket, even though the school wouldn't go for it. So you have nothing to worry about. Neil's like, cool. And they go ahead and he goes ahead and takes a shower. They go to Abby's. It's kind of like the chillest moment of the book, where they just have like dinner and Neil's just like observational mode, like looking at everyone. So anyway, Neil and Wymack go back to Wymack's apartment. Neil's like really weird about it. And when Neil's feeling really weird, he goes for a run. So Neil, run count number 2. Neil takes off. Anyway, the second day of practice. So they set up the second day of practice. They're in the locker room. Nikki is being like, sort of coming on to Neil. Neil's not about it. Nikki lets us know, like, he has a boyfriend, Eric, who's in Germany. That's why he knows German, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Aaron, when Andrew comes in to see, like, where they are, like, what's taking them so long, and Aaron says something about Nikki, like, coming out to Neil, and Andrew flips out. Andrew throws Nikki up against the lockers and pulls a knife on him and is like, don't you dare, in German. And Neil's like, what the hell is going on? Neil's like, what the hell is happening here? Like, yikes. So Neil's like, hey, I bet Kevin's waiting for us. And Andrew's like, oh yeah, Kevin. And then he's like, well, he just leaves. And Neil's like, what the hell, Nikki? Like, that doesn't seem okay. And Nikki's like, you get used to it. Nikki's basically like, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And Neil's like, I don't. So they go ahead and practice. They do a scrimmage, Kevin and Aaron versus Neil, Andrew, and Nikki. Andrew is really annoying the whole game. He's not like trying to save goals or whatever. He's just kind of like blasé about it. Neil's not a fan. Anyway, Kevin is not a fan of Neil's playing, and this tells Neil that he needs to shoot on Andrew until Andrew gets tired. So Neil does, and Neil doesn't make any shots, and Neil goes until he can no longer pick up a racket. So Andrew sends him home. Neil goes home. Wymack is waiting for him. Kevin's informed Wymack that Neil's probably blown his arms out. So Wymack tosses Neil a bag of coffee grounds. Neil catches it, but then it like immediately falls out of his grip because his arms are so weak, and it spills coffee grounds all over the floor. Wymack is like angry about this, and he like starts to yell at Neil, and Neil like freezes, because he's afraid, because he's traumatized, because Neil is traumatized. And Wymack's like, okay, wait a second. And he's like, Neil, come here. And Neil comes like arm's distance away. And Wymack's like, look at me. And Wymack's like, I'm not gonna hurt you. Like, you're safe with me. I won't use violence. Like, that's not gonna happen. And so Neil's not really reassured, but he's like slightly reassured. Okay, so summer practices continue. Neil is not doing well. He's being constantly berated by Kevin. He's not having a good time, and he feels like he's gonna have to quit. But he stays on because of his love of Exie, so he's willing to fight because he loves Exie. So he goes for a run to clear his head, run count number 3, and he shows up at the stadium, and he realizes people are there, and it's Kevin and Andrew. Now, Kevin is practicing on the inner court. He's practicing with his non-dominant hand, trying to improve his accuracy with his non-dominant hand. Neil is just like blown away, impressed by this. He's just in awe of Kevin Day. And he's really pissed that Andrew isn't playing with him. He's like, why won't you play with him? And Andrew's like, I just don't really care about Exie. Like, I'm not crazy about it. And this really annoys Neil because, like, if Andrew is so good, like, why does he have this attitude? Andrew pulls a knife out of his armbands, which he wears to differentiate himself from Aaron, and that pisses Neil off even more because he's like, do you have those on during the game? Like, we could get thrown out. Like, that wouldn't be cool. Like, I'm here to play, and I don't want any drama. Anyway, Andrew tells Neil that Kevin thinks that Neil could be good enough for court one day. Neil's like, this must be a lie. And then he's also worried that, like, if Kevin said that, maybe Kevin does know who he is. And so he's, like, kind of freaked about it. Andrew says, your loose ends aren't adding up. And Neil says, I'm not a math problem. And Andrew says, but I'll still solve you. And, yeah. The first time you read that, you think, wow, antagonists. The second time you read it, after having read all the books, you're like, the tension. It was there all along. Anyway, they leave. Kevin and Andrew leave. Neil has like this reminiscence about his mom, about her death. He had to burn her body in their car after they left Seattle because she died. And he took the bones out of the burned car and then buried them by the ocean and then made his way to Millport. So tragic. And he's just, feeling all this guilt because he thinks, he's going to have to leave this XC team because he doesn't want to be caught because, like, it would be disrespectful to his mother's memory to, like, immediately get caught after she died for him. And then he's also feeling guilty because, like, he wants to play XC. He, like, loves XC, and he has, like, a duty to the team or whatever. So Neil's just, like, sad hours. And Neil then, like, falls asleep in the stadium. So Neil has to come back to Wymac's apartment early in the morning the next day. And when he gets there, Kevin is there having a very intense conversation with Wymac. Cut. And Kevin is freaking out. Like, literally, he's actually having a panic attack. And Wymac tells Kevin to let him and Andrew worry about Rico, and then he tells him the ERC is giving us until June to break the news. Kevin then calls Jean, a player on the Ravens, who he's friends with, still, to confirm the news. He's speaking in French on the phone to Jean, which Neil also understands, presumably from his time abroad. So, apparently, the Ravens have joined the Foxes division. They used to be in the Northeast. Now they're in the Southeast. The Ravens are in West Virginia, so it's not really a stretch to, like, consider them to be added to the Southeast. But anyway, the Ravens are now in the Foxes division. So that's problematic for a lot of reasons. Neil is also freaked out about this because even though Kevin doesn't recognize him, it doesn't mean Rico won't recognize him. And this is because the three of them, Kevin, Neil, and Rico, witnessed a gang execution as children. This is right before Neil's mom took Neil on the run. So, Wymac tells Neil he can't tell anybody else about this. Wymac then tells Neil that the Moriyamas are a Yakuza group. And he then goes into, like, some detail about, like, patriarchal, like, first son lineage of, like, the gang or whatever. And then, like, Tetsuji and Rico are, like, allowed to go be off on their XC thing because they're second sons, and so they don't matter as much. But anyway, essentially, he tells Neil that Rico owns Kevin. Like, he wasn't really ever a son. He's owned by Rico. So, and then the skiing accident wasn't actually an accident, but was in fact abuse that Kevin suffered under the hands of the Moriyamas because Tetsuji felt like Kevin was getting better than Rico and Rico is supposed to be the best. So that's the lowdown on why Kevin is freaking out about the Moriyamas. Now, Neil's not really that surprised by this. It actually makes a lot of sense because it explains why they would have been there at this like gang execution, because Neil's dad is the butcher of Baltimore. He is like part of the mafia, and so Neil's like, I see. They're all like connected through gang violence, mafia, yakuza ties. So it's not really that surprising to Neil. It's not really that surprising to Neil. Also gives Neil like another reason to be afraid, because like the Moriyamas probably know that Neil is on the run from his dad, because his dad like clearly worked with them. So this is very problematic for Neil. He knows he cannot face the Ravens. So he's like, I'm gonna have to quit before we play the Ravens. Like, this sucks. So yeah. Neil says he couldn't outrun his thoughts. Neil goes on run number 4 after this. So fun. Okay. So at this point, the rest of the team moves in. Okay, Neil has been looking forward to everyone else moving in, because it means hopefully Kevin will stop berating him in practices, because there will be more folks to pick on. So everyone else is going to arrive. They have to get physicals done. They also have to like pick classes. So that's what's going on. Neil, there's like these asides to the academics, and like Neil briefly like thinks about like what his major should be. And it's kind of like the academic parts are kind of weird, because like they really only come in when it's like Neil's waiting for something to happen, or like they become relevant. I mean, they are very like highly realistic, because Neil like has like a trouble fitting everything into his schedule with like the practice times and like the classes he needs for his major, and he has to like start over several times. So all of this is like, yes, iconic collegiate like life, but at the same time, it's absolutely meaningless, because like these academics don't matter, and like supposedly Neil isn't going to be staying at this school for very long anyway, so I don't even know why we care. But anyway, Neil's just like moseying in the stadium trying to figure out like his academics, when Nurse Abby's like, okay, let's do your physical. And, you know, she's like, does all the basic stuff, and then it's like, okay, Neil, take off your shirt. And Neil's like, no. And Abby's like, I can't check for track marks through your long sleeves. And Neil's like, I don't do drugs. And she's like, come on, bud, you have to take your shirt off. And she's like, I'm not gonna tell anyone, this is private, blah, 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 blah. So Neil's like, okay, but we're not gonna talk about it. Neil takes his shirt off, and he has scars. She was not ready for it. She was like, I've probably seen worse, and she has not seen worse. Like, Neil, it's yikes. So Neil's got like knife scars, he's got like burn marks, he has, he has like a road burn across the side of his body from like when he ducked and rolled out of a moving car. He's got like the print of an iron burned onto him from like when his dad burned him with an iron. He's got various knife scars from people attacking him with knives, coming after him for his father. So yeah, Neil is busted up, and that's why he wears such baggy clothes and long sleeves, and et cetera, and why he doesn't want anyone to see him shower. And Abby's like, Neil, this is pretty bad. And Neil's like, you said we weren't going to talk about it. And Neil puts back on his shirt and like gets the hell out of there, and runs into his roommate, Matt Boyd. Matt's like, oh hey Neil, or like, oh hey, you must be Neil. Matt's super tall. He's so Matt is tall, and he's confused by Neil's utter lack of stuff, because Wymack directs him to take Neil to go move into their dorm, and Neil just has that one bag with him, and Matt's like, what? That's all you got? And Neil's like, yeah. Anyway, Matt's truck is like loaded down with stuff. They get over to the dorm, they move in, they pick beds, whatever. Neil's like, oh, I'm gonna have to buy sheets. Matt leaves to go pick up Dan and Renee from the airport. Neil is like, okay, I guess I can probably leave my binder here, my binder and my duffel bag here. For the 30 minutes it's going to take me to go to the store, buy sheets, buy whatever else I need, and get back here. Like, I can lock the suite door. Matt won't be back in time. It'll have to be what it'll have to be. So Neil goes. He buys his sheets. He gets back, and he can tell. He can tell something's up. You know. First of all, Matt, Dan, and Renee are already back. But Neil doesn't think that Matt went through his stuff. Neil goes and looks at his duffel bag, and he's like, notices that the shirts, even though they've been folded and like put back like perfectly like they were, Neil always folds the tag over on the shirts, and Neil notices the tags aren't folded over, and so he knows that someone has gone through his stuff, and he pulls out everything and like finds the binder at the bottom, and he, looks through the binder. He's got contacts, fake IDs, extra contacts for his eyes, and then tons and tons of information on Kevin and Rico, like newspaper clippings, et cetera, and he's got money, like at least $500,000 or $250,000 in this thing, and so nothing seems to be taken, but he knows somebody has looked at it. So Neil is like really upset, and he knows who it must have been. So Neil takes out his lock-picking supplies after he locks his binder in the safe that he's just bought, and then puts it in his safe in his room. Neil takes off to the cousins' room, which has Kevin, Andrew, Aaron, and Nikki in it, and he picks the lock on their door, and bursts in and is like, says to Kevin in French, "Don't go through my stuff." And Aaron says to Nikki, like, "Hey, didn't we lock that door?" in German. So now Neil does something that's like slightly problematic here, where he's having this conversation with Kevin in French, and he calls Kevin cripple, and Kevin flips out of this. Kevin pushes Neil out into the hall and is like about to beat him up, and then Matt comes out, pulls Kevin off Neil. Andrew comes out and like prevents Matt from beating up Kevin, and everyone's like, Dan and Renee are like, "No, not this year. We're not doing this. Like, cut it out." And I forgot to mention that Neil runs to the store. So Neil run count number 5. The cousins everybody's basically like, the monsters are basically like, which the monsters is this group's name for this group of people on the team. There's divisions here. There are divisions. This team is not a team, you might say. These guys are like, "You're coming to the court with us later." And Neil's like, okay, because he has to do damage control, because he has to figure out what these guys know based on his binder, or like what they think of him. So Neil agrees to go to the court later. After this whole shenanigan, these guys go back in their room, and Neil gets a chance to meet Dan and Renee. So Dan is team captain. She's one of the few female team captains in collegiate XC. Renee just seems really sweet. She's got white hair that is dyed rainbow pastel colors at the ends. So yeah. And she's wearing like a cross necklace. So that's kind of the deal on that. Dan's like, "Hey, Nikki," when they're leaving, and he's like, "Don't screw this boy up. I'll get you if you do." So they ride over to the stadium. Apparently, they learn that John taught Kevin how to speak French. And then Andrew says something about Neil knowing French, and he says, "Oh, a liar who practices occasional honesty." And it's like, this kid just says things that like you wish you'd come up with in an argument, and then you didn't think of them until later. Like, Andrew just has those things like rolling off his tongue. So anyway, Andrew messes with Neil the whole time. they have like this whole conversation that's laced with like tension and implications about like Neil's binder. And so Neil knows that like Andrew's the one who looked through his stuff. And then Andrew says that he's going to take Neil to Columbia, South Carolina, to fix this. Neil agrees that he'll go with them on the terms that they won't go through his stuff again. So the only two we haven't met yet are Seth and Allison. So after this after this car ride, we're in the like lounge, waiting for everyone. So Seth and Allison show up, and no one likes Seth, and Seth doesn't like anyone else. That's kind of his deal. Allison then sits next to Neil. She's sitting, like, Neil's sitting in like an armchair by himself, and Allison sits like on the arm of the chair, and she's already like, Allison is like a rich girl who has like disobeyed her parents by like going to Palmetto and playing Exy and like dating Seth. So she's a rebel, but she's wearing like high heels and like a short pink like tight dress and has like blonde hair, whatever. So Allison sits next to Neil on this armchair and like it pulls her dress up or whatever. So Neil has this like fun little backstory where he says like he used to like check girls out or whatever, but then his mom was like afraid that if he dated anyone, he would like tell them his secrets or like their story, and that would put them in danger. And so she would beat Neil until he got the idea that he wasn't allowed to like look at girls. They're like, girls were off limits. So we'd love to examine the psychological implications of that fun backstory, but yeah, so this clearly had insane effects on Neil's psyche. Fun. Anyway, so this is the moment when Marmac tells the team about the ERC's decision to transfer the Ravens into their district. So slightly before this, like Nikki, like they talk about like what could possibly be worse because they've already been like facing like so much hate for having Kevin on their team. And Nikki bets that like one of them will die and that it'll be Seth. And yeah. Anyway. Kevin freaks out for this like whole announcement. Everyone is not happy about it. Andrew confronts Kevin and gets mad that Kevin didn't tell him. They have a really like tense conversation about like, I want to stay and like I'll protect you and like blah 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 and don't let him take me. And so like it just further serves to like show that their relationship is very strange and that nobody understands it. It's like got this weird like romance. Like, and also, but not really, but like, also, why does Kevin think Andrew, this like medicated, like 5-foot punk can like protect him, but also Andrew's such a badass that like maybe it is true? Like, I don't know. Anyway, like, how is Andrew supposed to protect Kevin from the Yakuza? Anyway, moving on. So, Neil asks Renee why Kevin trusts Andrew, and he doesn't really get an answer. Anyway, that's kind of Neil's whole deal. It's like Neil is like playing this like a game where he's like a detective and he's trying to like figure everything out. So he's always just asking people questions about like their relationships with one another, so he can kind of like get a feel for everybody else. Okay, so after this, Neil runs back to Fox Tower because he's already done his physical, so he doesn't need to wait for anyone. So Neil checks the binder, and he feels like sorry for himself because he doesn't understand how Kevin can trust Andrew, and he just wishes he had someone to trust. And he feels like he's going to be alone for his whole life. So that's really sad. So he's kind of jealous of Kevin in that moment. He then burns a cigarette by the window to remember the way his mother's body smelled when he burned her, which is like insane. But yeah, so that's fun. Okay, so Matt and Seth return to the dorm. Seth is also their roommate. Seth is like really not a fan of Neil and is like, how are we gonna play with this loser amateur? And then he's like, well, at least I heard you're like a fast runner. And Neil's like, I like running. And Seth's like, fuck running. And then he's like, running doesn't win us points. You have to score too. So that's fun. And then Neil gets dinner with Matt, Seth, Dan, Allison, and Renee, the upperclassmen. Dan and Matt are really the only ones to like include Neil in the conversation. And they also like, it's kind of clear from this that they are in a romantic relationship. So Allison and Seth are also sort of in a romantic relationship, except for it's like off and on romantic relationship. So they get back, and Nikki's like, Andrew's missing, and he asks Renee to call Andrew. And so Renee calls Andrew, and they find out that Andrew is just at YMAX and it's fine or whatever. But this is kind of like surprising to Neil because he's like, why are Renee and Andrew friends? Like, that's kind of weird because they seem to be like in different parts of the team. Anyway, it seems like nobody's a fan of Neil or of Andrew and Renee being friends, but they're friends. Okay, so practices. At practice, Kevin and Seth fight continuously. There's like no getting along on this team. Like, Matt and Kevin also fight. It's not as bad as Seth and Kevin, but like, because these two are both strikers and they are getting in fights constantly. Matt, Aaron, and Nikki are all defensive players. Andrew and Renee are goalies. Allison and Dan are dealers. Dan is an offensive dealer. Allison's a defensive dealer. I'm not really sure what the difference is because they seem to sub in and out for one another, but whatever. And Neil is also a striker. He's a striker sub. So they have 10 players total, and 9 is the minimum required to have a team. But anyway, there's like constant fighting. It's just not going well for anybody. Wymack doesn't really interfere in these fights, but he does like make them do more cardio as like punishment or like run more because of the fights, but he doesn't really interfere in them. He just kind of like lets the team be. All right, Neil always runs back to the dorm instead of getting in the car with anyone. So the Neil run count is like insane at this point. It's like basically every day. But I'll still make a note of when Neil takes a run. So anyway, the Columbia trip. Okay. So, the Columbia trip. Nikki shows up. Neil's kind of forgotten about the Columbia thing. But Nikki shows up and gives Neil a bag of clothes. And he's like, here's some clothes. You can't wear that to where we're going because it's not cool enough or whatever. He's like, Andrew picked it out. Andrew paid for it, blah, blah, blah. And Neil's like, I don't want to wear this. And Nikki's like, you're going to. And then he's also like, Andrew said that you should take out the contacts too. And Neil's like, I don't want to do that. But Neil changes. The outfit is like black cargo pants, black like combat boots, and then like this black like ripped long sleeve that has like a gray mesh layer underneath it. It's like tight clothes that Neil would never wear. But Neil does take his contacts out. He gets in the car and goes with them to Columbia. Before they get in the car to go to Columbia, Andrew grabs Neil by the neck and like looks into his eyes because Neil's taken the contacts out and says, another unexpected bit of honesty. Yeah. So Neil is sitting in the back between Aaron and Andrew. Nikki's driving, Kevin's in the passenger seat. So they're driving. Nikki asks Aaron to wake Andrew up so he can ask which exit to get off at. Aaron taps Andrew, and then Andrew flings his elbow into Neil as he wakes up, and Neil's like gonna puke. Anyway, Andrew is like, okay, it's like this exit coming up, and then Andrew's like, oh, we need to pull over. So Andrew can like drive you because he's having withdrawal because he's off his medication. So Anyway, they get to Sweeties, and Neil's like, oh, what's going on? They go in, and Aaron grabs crackers from the salad bar, and they give them to then puts the wrappers in a waiter's pocket. So they get to their table and they say oh, just the ice cream special to the waitress. So when the waitress comes back, she brings them silverware, napkins, and bowls of ice cream. And then they go through the silverware and napkins, and they're in that there's packets of drugs. It's some kind of powder drug. They call it dust. What do they call it? Yeah, so the dust. So they eat the ice cream, they do the dust, whatever. Neil's like, I'm not doing this drugs thing. So then they go to this nightclub called Eden's Twilight. They bypass the line, the bouncers know them. Neil is about it. He goes up with Andrew to the bar to get soda. He's handed his soda. Neil's not used to the sugar and caffeine in soda, so he's kind of getting jazzed from it. Neil does not want to go for the drugs, but they have dosed his drink. Neil notices on the last shot that it's way sweeter than soda would be, and he's really mad. Neil tries to fight them, but they force him onto the dance floor. Nikki and honestly, okay, so this next bit is I don't know how Neil recovers from this and then is okay being friends with these people, but okay. Nikki kisses Neil on the dance floor and through this kiss forces more drugs and alcohol into down Neil's throat. So Neil tries to retreat from the dance floor, finds Andrew at the back of the wall. They have this conversation. Neil says I hate you. Andrew says take a number and get in line with the rest of this team. Andrew then confronts Neil about the binder. Andrew thinks Neil is a runaway and that he might be a mole for the Moriyamas, and Neil's that couldn't be further from the truth. Anyway, after this, Neil blacks out kind of. So Neil wakes up in Colombia, in the house that Nikki owns in Colombia. Neil's super hungover. Nikki tries to make him drink water, but Neil refuses. This behavior is not acceptable, but also the behavior last night by the rest, these ones, also not acceptable. So anyway, Neil drinks water from the sink bathroom because he won't drink Nikki's water. And then he changes his clothes and puts on a pair of emergency contacts. He then goes out the window of the bathroom. All right, and now I'm going to switch to map mode to explain the rest of this journey. Neil's journey back to Palmetto from Colombia. So, as we know, Neil jumps out of the bathroom window from the house in Colombia. So, Neil takes a taxi. He calls a cab. How does he call a cab? He finds a cab somehow. And Neil takes this cab to a gas station. At that gas station, he buys an atlas, buys some water bottles, buys a notebook and pencils, and then he calls Matt from payphone. And Matt's like, where are you? Blah, blah, blah. Neil's like, oh, I'm in Colombia. And Matt's like, are you good? And Neil's like, yeah, I'm fine. He's fine. So Neil then calls a taxi from this gas station in Colombia, and then takes that taxi to a truck stop on the highway. I assume somewhere on this kind of outer belt or whatever. So Neil then poses as a sociology student doing a project about truckers, and he goes up to the truckers with this notebook and pencil and paper or whatever. He's like, hey, I just want to ask a few questions. And so he initially he finds somebody who's going up 77, but she doesn't want to take him. So then he tries a couple more and he finds someone going on 26. So this is actually better. So Neil then gets in the truck with this trucker, asking him the questions, and goes up 26 to Spartansburg, where it meets 85. So here he gets out of the truck and then gets in the truck into another truck, same story, with a trucker, goes past Greenville down 85 to where you would get off for Palmetto. So the trucker isn't going that way, so he just drops Neil off on the exit ramp, around this area, and then Neil has to walk 11 miles back to Palmetto. So Neil walks 11 miles, saying it's giving him plenty of time to think about everything and come up with a plan for what he's going to do and what he's going to say to Andrew about the whole binder thing. So, yes, Neil hitchhikes this way and then walks 11 miles for 3 hours. So, yes, by the time he gets back, the whole day has passed. And, everyone's freaked out. So, yes, that's Neil's journey back from Columbia. Okay, so Neil gets back to Wymac's apartment, and Wymac is pissed. He's like, what the hell were you thinking? Somebody would have come pick you up. He calls Andrew over and is like, get your ass over here. And he's like, we're going to figure this out right now. Andrew and Neil have this conversation. Andrew doesn't want to have this conversation in front of Wymac, so he switches to German, revealing to Andrew that Neil knows German. Andrew's quiet for a long time and then says, did no one tell you I hate surprises? And so we also, at this point, it's revealed that Andrew, while Aaron was raised by their biological mother, Andrew was in foster care and only later reunited with him. So Neil basically gives Andrew this kind of half lie. He implies that his dad had worked for the Moriyamas and was killed by them for doing the wrong thing, and that he's running from them because he stole money from them. And that's why he knows Kevin and Rico. So this is sort of half true. Andrew is like, well, then why the hell did you come here? And Neil's like, I'm tired of running. I'm jealous of Kevin. I don't want to be nothing. I want to play XC, blah, 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 blah. Neil's like, please, Andrew, let me stay. He wonders if maybe he could tell Andrew the whole truth, but he doesn't. He tells Andrew that he's going to have to leave before the Edgar Allan game. Andrew says he won't tell Kevin, promises Neil he won't tell Kevin. And so basically at this point, Neil's chosen to trust Andrew. So cute. Anyway, Neil checks his safe when he gets back, and then he's hopeful, but he says hope was a dangerous thing about being, he's hopeful about being on Foxes or whatever. Neil's chilling in his dorm. Matt and Seth are out in the general room. Kevin comes over to the door. Matt's like, you're not coming in here. So Neil is worried that Kevin may know, that Andrew may have told Kevin of what Neil just told him. And Kevin says, the next time I come for you, you will follow me, and it's time to collect what's mine. So basically the possessiveness for me. It's the possessiveness for me in this sports thing. It's just sports, but here we are getting all worked up about it. Kevin comes again for Neil the next night. Matt and Seth try to prevent Neil from leaving, and Neil says he'll be back, and Seth says, are you stupid? And Neil says, yeah. So yeah, that's a vibe. Then it's they have night practice. So basically Kevin puts Neil through the paces, and Neil's like, well, why haven't we been doing this the whole time? And Kevin's like, Andrew hadn't cleared you yet. I had to get you cleared by Andrew first. So basically, Andrew's given Kevin the okay to start really training with Neil. Kevin is putting Neil through the paces. It's Kevin and Andrew and Neil. Okay. So Kevin is training Neil in Ravens drills. And Neil is really inspired by Kevin. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna master these. So they basically practice late into the night, and then Neil has to go back, and then they have to wake up early the next morning for practice too. So Neil's never getting any sleep. Anyway, so the ice is starting to thaw between these two. So Nikki then says to Aaron at practice in German, he says do you think he's ever gonna forgive us for the Columbia thing? And this is when Neil realizes that Andrew must not have told these two that he knows German. So either Andrew really likes drama or he's just like good at keeping Neil's secrets. So that's the deal. So then comes like the official like world announcement that the Ravens have joined the Foxes division. So obviously it's a social media shitstorm anyway. Seth is like really annoyed because he doesn't get why so many people care like so much about Kevin. He's like, people should care about me. And then he's like, when's the last time anyone cried about you? And Neil's like, I just want to play the game. And Seth's like, maybe you're not as stupid as I thought. And Neil says, maybe I am. And I love Neil's commitment to the stupidity thing. Like, he's like, no, I'm dumb. Like, have no faith in me, please. So then comes, they have to like go visit the psychologist, Betsy. Everybody has to do like a little psyche eval before like they can like start practicing officially or like be on campus or whatever. So Neil and like everyone's paired together so that like they can get rides and also so that like they are not like missing people from practice for like the scrimmages or whatever. So Neil and Renee are paired together and they go off to go see Betsy. And Neil is like, immediately, I hate this. Like immediately, I don't do psych evals. So Neil is just trying to be like as normal as possible to Betsy. And he like basically like doesn't really tell her anything and also immediately hates her. So that's fun. Sorry, Renee. Neil like doesn't really like Renee either. But he asks Renee like why she and Andrew get along. Like Neil kind of wants the Renee backstory because he's like, why are you on this team? Like you seem kind of well adjusted. And she's not giving him the Renee story. She's like, no, we're not that close. Anyway, things are coming, like moving along. Like we're gonna have our first game soon. And Coach Wymack tells everybody that Kevin is gonna be on the Kathy for Dan show at the morning after their first game. And so they're all like, oh yay, we're coming. Like I'm gonna bring donuts. Yeah. So that's gonna be like a press experience for them. So the first day of classes, this is kind of a weird portion because it's like, why do we care? Anyway, like this is kind of a long portion about like the first, like Neil's class schedule and like him eating lunch with people. And it's like, he like goes to all of his classes and then like immediately falls asleep when he gets back. And Matt's like, how you doing, bud? And Neil's like, I'm fine, count number 2. Neil was announced this morning of the Friday game, and he had been being kept a secret because the previous like striker that they had like recruited had attempted suicide because of like all the hate the Foxes get. So Neil was being like kept secret for his own like protection. So anyway, various teammates like walk him from class to class. I mean these people, not these people. Anyway, walk him from class to class to keep him safe. And then he gets lunch with Seth and Allison. And they're like on and on part of their relationship, so they're not really talking to Neil, so Neil's cool with that. But anyway, Allison asks Neil who he's going to take to the banquet. And Neil's like, nobody, like, I'm not doing that. And then there's like a couple, like kind of some relationship reveals. So basically like Aaron is kind of dating this vixen, this is the cheerleaders, named Caitlin. It's sort of like a unspoken thing, like they're not really on yet. But anyway, Renee and Andrew will probably go together, even though Allison says like this is never going to be an actual relationship. And then Dan and Matt will go together, Allison and Seth go together, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so then comes the first game. Neil's very excited about it because, you know, it's like insanity. Dan is like, hey, Neil, I have to tell you something. And Dan basically gives an explanation of the Andrew drug protocol during games, which, get ready for something strange. Okay, so Andrew plays the games sober. Andrew comes off his meds in the morning and then plays the first half of the game and then takes his meds during the halftime and then sits out the second half. So that's how the Andrew thing works. He's sober during the first half of the game. So he only ever plays the first half. So that's the deal. Basically, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. And I don't get it. on the Andrew drug thing, but whatever, it like works for them. Anyway, it's like a plot device. It's a plot device. Let's just call it that. It doesn't really make sense. It's a plot device. Kevin then takes Neil before the game into the inner court and is like, look at the crowd. He's like, don't disappoint them. They're here to see you. And like everyone's going crazy because it's like Kevin or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the game. I will move over to game mode to explain the game. Ta-da. Go Foxes. All right. So the games. So games descriptions are actually really good. So if you're thinking like, I'm not going to read these books because I don't want to read about sports, the game descriptions are actually one of the best part. They're really well written. So this is the starting lineup. We have Kevin and Seth as strikers, Matt and Aaron in defense, backliners, Andrew in goal, and Dan as the dealer. I have like defensive dealer, but she's really an offensive dealer. So anyway, Renee, Nikki, Allison, and Neil are subs for these ones when the game starts. So the rules of the game are designed to like maximize fights. And like body slams. So basically you're allowed to body slam anyone who has the ball. And body slams are still allowed like within like there's like a 2-second zone after the ball leaves a player's net where they can be body slammed, just like a grace period zone. So anyway, this is like the inner court and this is like the outer ring. So the subs are like, you can imagine like standing here and the refs are also in this like outer deal. So Neil says the Foxes dislike each other, but they disliked their teammates more, which is basically how they're able to function as a team during the games, is that they just like dislike the other team so much that they're able to sort of come together on that. The Jackals score first. Seth and Kevin get in a fight about this. Then Kevin immediately scores, causing a fight between the Jackals and Kevin. So they're the Breckenridge Jackals, and they like are described as playing dirty, and they had been the best in the division before the Ravens joined their division. So a Jackal gets a yellow card because of this. So there's cards like soccer, yellow card up here. So we know that the Jackals have like one yellow card. Okay, so Seth then gets injured. He gets slammed up against the wall. He has to like actually inform the refs that he's injured, like verbally, before they can like send a sub in. So anyway, Seth comes out and Neil goes in. Neil's time to shine. Neil doesn't really think he's ready for this, but he goes on anyway. So the Jackals score again. Neil gets into a verbal argument with the backliner who's defending him. And then Kevin, like, they're really trying to slam into Kevin's, like, damage Kevin's arms, because they know he's had, like, that hand injury. So Kevin's, like, yells at Matt to get the backliner off of him, Gorilla. So Matt then fouls this backliner in a way that like actually injures him, and so like the backliner retaliates. There's like a brief fight. Matt gets a yellow card. Yes, so Matt gets a yellow card, but the gorilla has to go off because he's injured. So that gets him off of Kevin. Now Kevin's kind of also dealing with injury. And so Kevin comes back off, and Matt comes off, and Nikki goes in, and Seth's ready to go back in. So that's how that shakes down. So Neil scores a goal after this. So yay for Neil. We're very proud of him. And then ultimately, they do lose 7-9, but Neil scores 2 goals for the Foxes, so we're proud of him so Neil scores 2 goals, Seth scores 2, and Kevin scores 3. So that's pretty, I mean, I think it's pretty good for Neil's first game. But anyway, this is how the game is played. The second half isn't really described. It just is that they lose 7-9. Neil must have scored another goal in like the second half, but we don't get description for it. Excellent. All right, the talk show. So, team wakes up super early after their game to go on Kathy Ferdinand's TV show. So, only Kevin is supposed to be on the show. Everyone else gets on this bus, it's super early. Ugh, it's annoying. So early. Anyway, they get there, and Kathy comes out, and she's like, oh my god, Kevin. And Kevin's like, press space on. He's like, Kathy, so good to see you. I'm so excited to make this public appearance for the first time. And then Kathy's like, oh, and you too, Neil. And Neil's like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah, you're the most searched striker behind Kevin and Rico. And I'm so glad you're going to be on my show. And Neil's like, I'm not going on this show. And then Kevin and Neil have this conversation in French where basically Kevin threatens to kick Neil off the team if he doesn't go on the show with him. So basically Neil is forced into going on the show by Kevin. So Kevin goes on the show, or Neil goes on the show. So they go into this dressing room, and Neil and Kevin are given clothes to wear. Neil's really weird about changing into them, obviously, for known reasons. Andrew says to Neil, you're so stupid. And Andrew thinks he was right, so Neil didn't bother arguing with him. More commitment to the bit. Kevin gives Neil this whole pep talk about talking to the press. And then he's asking, Kevin, why did you tell the ERC I'll make court? And then Neil is also asking Kevin about Kevin and Andrew's relationship. Kevin's basically you will make court, and then he's I don't know, he doesn't really say anything about his relationship with Andrew. Neil's asking all the right questions, and no one's giving him any answers. So fun. So we also are as the reader, completely confused about why anybody is friends or trusts each other in this situation. Anyway, so the crowd goes wild for Kevin Day. And Kathy is I still think of you as one half of a whole, talking about Rico. And so she goes through a list of questions, why did you transfer? And Kevin's okay, Coach Wymack was friends with my mother, so he was the one I could turn to when I, had my accident and couldn't do anything. And she asks what he was thinking when he was recruiting Neil, and Kevin's he's the only one for us. Neil has such passion for the sport. I can tell he's gonna be great. Then Kevin says 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead, and it's PLL vibes. So they bring Neil out onto the stage. The amateur who caught the champion's eye. Whatever. Neil lies through his teeth about his background and whatever. And then they ask Kevin, do you really have no plans to return to the Ravens? And then Kathy's I've got a treat for you. And who shows up but Rico Moriyama himself? Kevin flips. Neil's I get it, dude. Neil completely forgets being mad at Kevin for being forced to be on the show because Neil's oh, yikes. I know how it is. So, Rico and Kevin hug. It's very awkward. Kathy is just trying to antagonize the whole time. Ugh. According to Rico, the accident was emotionally crushing. This is where it starts to get really intense. And Rico and Neil have this fight that I feel you really need to see acted out to really get it. So let's go do that.
Heartbreaking. But look at him now. Isn't it amazing how far he's come this year? I'm not sure it is. But I'm saying that as his brother, as his best friend. You saw him last night, Kathy. I'm worried his wishful thinking and obsession will lead him to injure himself again. Can he recover a second time, emotionally or mentally? I thought friends were supposed to cheer each other on. Believing in him now is the least you could do after completely abandoning him last winter. Forgive my bad manners. I didn't forget you over there. I just got distracted. Let's get the pair of you introduced. Though I'm not sure either one of you needs an introduction by now. Rico, Neil. Neil, Rico. Kevin's past and present, or shall I say past and future? To address that accusation of yours, mine and Kevin's relationship is unique, and I do not expect you to understand it. Do not impress on us your petty ideas of friendship. Was unique. Was. I'm pretty sure your relationship died when he couldn't keep up with your team anymore. Kevin chose to leave Edgar Allan. We mourned his absence, but we're glad to hear he found a coaching position. But you're not happy that he's playing again. Isn't that why you transferred to our district? You don't think Kevin should be on the court again, so you'll cut him off at the pass. You'll destroy his chance of making a comeback and make him watch as your team succeeds yet again. You're rubbing his face in everything he's lost, and from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're enjoying it. I will ask you only once to tone down this animosity. I can't. I have a bit of an attitude problem. A bit? Neil does bring up a valid point I'd like to discuss. The district change is an unprecedented move. For it to be Edgar Allan is even more surprising. Neither your coach nor the XC Rules and Regulations Committee has given a satisfactory reason, but I don't think Neil's far off in thinking you transferred because of Kevin. Kevin plays only a small role in our decision, and not for the reasons this child claims. It was not a decision made lightly on our part, and we've taken an unfair bit of criticism for it. The North says we're transferring to keep our rankings secure, as if they ever had a chance of unseating us, and the South cries unfair at having to contend with us. We are the nation's best team, after all, and the Southeastern District is, well, it's subpar, to be polite. To be honest, its teams are dreadful. We hope our transfer changes that. We're here to inspire the South. You want to do for the South what Kevin is doing for the Foxes. Yes, but it'll be so much easier if Kevin plays along. How so? Kevin cannot and will not play for us again. He knows this. This is why he did not return to us this spring. Our affection for him doesn't forgive his new inadequacies on the court, and he respects the Ravens too much to drag us down. That doesn't mean Evermore isn't his home. His work with the Foxes this spring proved we can find a place for him on our staff. We'd like him to return as one of our coaches. Sounds like a difficult choice, Kevin. I have to admit, both ideas fascinate me. As much as I love watching the Foxes improve, it breaks my heart to see you away from Edgar Allan. You wouldn't honestly have him go back, would you? I can't believe it. This has nothing to do with you. Stop being so selfish. If Kevin's dream has always been to be the best on the court, what right do you have to take it away from him? Why would you ask him to settle for less? The Foxes are giving him a chance to play, whereas you'd relegate him to the sidelines. He has no reason to transfer back. Palmetto State is a waste of his talents. Not as much as Edgar Allan was. Your team's ranked first? Congratulations and big deal. Maintaining a top position is far easier than starting over from the gutters. Kevin's doing that right now. He's facing entirely new schools and learning to play with his less dominant hand. When he masters it, and he will, he'll be better than you could have ever made him. Do you know why? It's not just his natural talent. It's because he's with us. There are only 10 Foxes this year. That's one sub for every position. Think about it. Last night we played Breckenridge. They have 27 people on their roster. They can burn through players as fast as they want because they have a pile of replacements. We don't have that luxury. We have to hold our ground on our own. You didn't hold your ground. You lost. Your school is the laughingstock of the NCAA. You're a team with no concept of teamwork. Lucky for you, if we were a unified front, you wouldn't have a chance against us. You cannot last, and your unfounded arrogance is offensive to everyone who actually earned a spot in Class 1. Everyone knows the only reason Palmetto qualified for this division is because of your coach. Funny, I'm pretty sure that's how Edgar Allan qualified. We've earned our prestige 1,000 times over. You've earned nothing but pity and scorn, neither of which should be tolerated in a sport. Someone as inexperienced as you are has no right to have an opinion on the matter. All the same, I'll give you one more. I don't think you're telling Kevin to sit out because of his health. I think you know this season is going to be a disaster for your reputation. You and Kevin have always played in each other's shadows. You've always been a pair. Now you have to face each other on the court as rivals for the first time, and people are finally going to know which one of you is better. They're going to know how premature this was. I think you're scared. I'm not scared of Kevin. I know him. You're going to eat those words. You're going to choke on them. That sounds like a challenge. You've got 7 weeks before your match, and I, for one, am counting down the seconds. There's so much to look forward to this year, but one question can't wait. Orange or black, Kevin? What color is the future? I already said it. I'd like to stay at Palmetto for as long as they're willing to have me.
So Neil is really wilding on this TV show, and nobody was really expecting it, and nobody's really prepared for it. I don't think Neil really thought he was gonna do this. Honestly, from a you're being chased by the gang standpoint, it doesn't really make any sense, Neil's behavior. But it is iconic, so we'll let it slide. So they go off the air, and Rico throws Neil up against the wall, and Neil thinks he had the same eyes Neil's father had. He looked at him and only saw flesh that knew how to bleed. Okay, so Neil pulls Rico away from Kevin. Andrew shows up. Andrew's like, don't touch my things, Rico. I don't share. Anyway, Wymack is pissed at Neil for picking a fight with Rico on national television. And Andrew's like, oh, it's cool, bro. Andrew glides his fingers across Neil's back on his way to Kevin. So, it's so subtle. It's so subtle. And then Andrew's like, I want to see you when we get back, after they get back. So, Andrew calls Neil as unpredictable as he is unreal. And then he's like, how's that target on your back feel? And Neil's like, familiar. Andrew is grabs Neil by the collar and he's like, Neil, you can't leave now. You're probably being looked for. And Neil's like, no. Andrew's like, what would it take to make you stay? And Andrew basically lays down a game plan for Neil. He's like, Andrew's gonna stand between Neil and the Moriyamas if Neil will stand by Kevin for the next year. He says, you gave your game to Kevin, now give your back to me. So Andrew says Neil will join them in Columbia that night. So Neil doesn't understand why Andrew would help him, or if Andrew really can help him. Neil goes for a run to think about this. Okay, and then we have Columbia night 2. So Andrew says, this is when you stop being the rabbit. You're gonna stop running, because we're gonna take care of you. When they're on their way out, they see Allison and Seth also leaving campus. Allison checks Seth's pockets for drug paraphernalia. Everybody sees this. Everybody watches them do this. Neil reveals that he can speak German. Nikki and Aaron are like, you've heard us say so many stupid things. Nikki's like, I've embarrassed myself in front of everyone. And then this time, they really let Neil choose whether he's going to do the drugs or not. Andrew again gives Neil clothes, and Neil's like, I can buy my own clothes. And they're like, well, why don't you? Neil realizes that Andrew really has been keeping all of his secrets for him, other than the contacts thing. And so Neil is kind of oh, I guess this is cool. I can trust Andrew. And Neil and Nikki have this conversation about family, and Nikki's like, family means something different between them. And Neil thinks back to how Aaron and Andrew don't really interact. They're not really family in the same way. So really it's more Andrew sort of treats Kevin and Aaron and Neil his family now, rather than it being more directly the relationships between them. So So he thinks like maybe I can be the Neil that I gave Andrew in Wynak's living room with Andrew like all the time. Like he can let Neil, like Neil can let Andrew into his life. Okay, so they talk about the house. Nikki says the house is his. He came back from Germany to be the twins' legal guardian over his super religious parents. Then Andrew and Neil sort of like set up this, it's sort of like set up between them that there's kind of like this conversational game that they play called, Andrew calls it the honesty game, where like they trade truths. Andrew is like, don't lose Kevin's interest to Neil, and Neil's like, can you really protect me? And he's like, I guess I'll be giving my life to Andrew. Aaron gets a call from Coach. Seth is dead. Yes, let me repeat that. Seth is dead. Apparently, it was an overdose. Everybody's like, oh my god. And then Kevin's like, what about the lineup? And Nikki's like, dude, the man is dead permanently. Ah, the man is dead permanently. That was not planned. Anyway, so Andrew implies that Seth was actually probably murdered by the Moriyamas due to like the Kathy Ferdinand show thing, because Seth wouldn't have been taking drugs when his relationship was good with Allison, which it was, and also we saw Allison check for the drug stuff, so Seth didn't have anything on him, which means that like definitely this was murder. So everyone's kind of freaked out about that. And that's like literally the last thing that happens. And now they only have 9 players, the like literal minimum requisite for a team. But at the same time, so the last thing that happens is that Andrew gives Neil a key to the Columbia house. And Neil like looks at the key and is like, home. And then he whispers to himself, welcome home, Neil. And it's like really sweet. Like for the first time in his life, Neil kind of has a home. And Seth is dead. And they're being chased by the Moriyamas. So yeah, that's how the book ends. With little to no hope that they're going to make it through this. But yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. And catch me in the next ones.